Hi, everybody. Garrett Sussman, the Senior Content Marketing Manager at Grade Us, is. And I really appreciate everyone coming out. We have a wonderful group. So today we are hosting this webinar. It's Grade Us partnered with UpCity, and it's why digital marketing agencies should be building reputation management strategies for 2020. Now, I think it's really an interesting topic just because a lot of digital marketing agencies out there, whether they're Grade Us customers or UpCity, agencies that have a listing there, do a lot of reputation management services for their clients, but they don't always think about how to represent themselves online, how to represent themselves digitally. So today I'm joined by three experts who are very familiar with the digital marketing agency ecosystem. They have a lot of great information for you. Just to give you a heads up, we're going to go through the topics and we're going to all just have this really great conversation. And then we are going to save about 15 minutes at the end for your questions. So feel free to ask questions in the GoToWebinar panel there, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. So welcoming us today, we have Heidi Sullivan, who's the SVP of Product and Marketing at UpCity.com. You can find her on Twitter at HKSully. Thank you for joining us today, Heidi.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. We've got Deanie Dietrich, who's.
I'm sorry.
I know.
You poor thing.
I had a birthday party with five 25-year-olds this weekend. So
kid germs are the worst.
Like
She's like apologizing ahead of time. She's like, excuse my voice. I was like, you sound fine. But yeah, when you're with kids like that, that's an inevitable.
I promise no one can catch it through the computer.
Yeah, no one, you don't need to wear your masks for this webinar. Next up, we have Deanie Dietrich, who's the founder of spinsucks.com. You can find her on Twitter at Jeannie Dietrich, GINIDIETRICH. Very friendly online. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeannie.
It's my pleasure.
And finally, we have Dean Heasley, who is the founder of Nashville Marketing Systems, an agency based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And he can be found at NashvilleMarketingSystems.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Dean.
Absolutely. Thank you, Garrett.
So let's dive in, talking reputation for digital marketing agencies. So first off, and I'm going to direct this to you, Heidi, because I think you really have a pulse on digital marketing agencies. How do you see our digital marketing agencies finding their clients? What have been the most effective channels in 2019?
Sure. So we actually did a survey of the marketing agencies in our marketplace a couple of months ago. And it was very interesting as we started to look out the right strategies for acquiring new clients. As you look at where marketing agencies are spending their time on behalf of their customers, it doesn't necessarily line up with where they're spending time themselves in doing that. Oh, I sound terrible. But so much of that comes from organic word of mouth, both on the street and digitally. And your reputation online, whether it's on social, whether it's on review sites, whether it's even on your own site, customers these days are just looking for more pieces of information before they actually reach a buying decision. And that all happens with us having our phone in our hand. If you eat a bad hamburger, that's really your bad for not checking out the reviews ahead of time. If you have a bad haircut, anything like that. The same is really true for B2B, and I think we've seen a big change with that over the past few years, that what was once really true for B2C is becoming true for B2B, that when you're selling to other businesses, they are looking to see what comparable businesses are saying about you, what case studies you have, everything like that. And so then when it comes to actual lead generation, people are finding us. There is no more silver bullet of, I'm going to advertise in this magazine or be featured on this newscast or get a mention in the New York Times and everybody finds, everybody's going to read it. We need to find our audiences where they are. And so much of that is through search and kind of that initial point all the way through to when they're ready to make a buying decision.
That's really interesting, and you're so on point about this whole buyer's journey and how, like, just the last 5 years, how much more comprehensive it is, how much more empowered consumers are. Jeannie, are you seeing, like, when you're talking to different agencies, are they doing advertising for their own businesses? Is it all organic, like inbound search? Like what
Not even
have
that.
you seen?
It's
If anything.
as Heidi said before we started recording, they're not drinking their own champagne, but it's the cobbler's children scenario, right? I mean, we're great at doing it for clients, but all of that stuff that we know works and we should be doing, we're not doing for ourselves. And referrals and word of mouth still reign supreme in bringing in new clients, which is great, but it's also not predictable. You can't control it. So there are lots of things that we should be doing to help sort of anticipate or predict the clients that you're going to bring in, where you're not just waiting for the phone to ring and waiting and waiting, and then suddenly the phone rings 7 times and you've got 7 new clients. Like you can't do that. You have to do the same kinds of things that you would do for your clients.
Well, that's like a really good point and interesting challenge for digital marketing agencies in general is you only have so much room. You only have so much bandwidth in terms of your client roster. There's obviously, it's a different animal for someone who's just starting up and trying to fill up a roster in the first place versus someone who has to kind of pick and choose who they're even working with. Dean, when you and I have talked in the past, we've talked about, word of mouth referrals like Jeannie mentioned. That's obviously an offline sort of way to generate, but it is very popular in the way digital marketing agencies generate their clients. What role would you say that reputation actually plays when it comes in the referrals and word of mouth kind of developing your agency?
Sure. So for most of the clients that come to me, what their customer journey looks like is someone talks to them and they get referred to me. And then the second piece of that journey is where reputation management comes in. Whereas they'll Google me, they'll Google Nashville Marketing Systems or Dean Heasley or whoever. And then when they find the reputation is really amazing, in part thanks to Grade.us. When they find that, that's when the touch point happens. That's when they call me. That's when they initiate the contact with me. So I really use the reputation management as like really the business card. I was talking to somebody who does media coaching in New York, and he said, your business card is not your business card. The first page of Google is your business card. Yeah. So that reputation management is so important. And we'll probably talk about this later, but I've almost gotten to the point where if the first interaction that they have with my business is what they find online, I'm not very likely to take them as a client. But we can talk about that.
That's interesting.
Well,
but later.
Piqued my interest.
One small thing just to add is one thing that we've seen with agencies in the Upcity marketplace. We talk a lot about the flywheel, and a lot of you have probably seen this through like HubSpot stuff. That when you're trying to fill that top of the funnel, instead of thinking of a funnel, thinking of it as a flywheel, and that if you're actually delighting your customers, they're going to build that reputation, you're going to be able to engage. But then we've also seen that agencies really struggle on the conversion side too. So we've really recently launched a mystery shopping service where we will mystery shop our agencies. And Harvard Business Review has shown like you need to respond within 5 to 10 minutes of receiving a query, and then there's a significant drop off. But we had about 45% of our agencies who responded in the first 10 minutes, but there was 10% that responded in over 24 hours. And even though that may not seem like a long time to respond when you first get a query, if I am submitting a query to 3 different agencies and I get 2 to call me back in 10 minutes and the other one I hear from 24 hours later, I'm already down an RFP path. I've already moved forward. And so also thinking about that conversion process and what you have the capability to ingest.
5 to 10 minutes.
I'm telling you, everybody else is
doing? Just like
responding.
sitting there hitting refresh over and over again?
But it makes sense, right? Because you think about it, it's like most people these days are going to do tons and tons of research online before they even reach out to a person. And then it's almost like, they turn up the treadmill to 20 because it's like the second they reach out to someone, they're ready to have that
I'm
conversation.
ready to
And if
go.
you're not
Sure.
ready,
Sure.
yeah.
Just don't go to the bathroom. You might miss one.
Well, Jeannie, how do you handle that in terms of the conversion part when the lead gets there? How do you recommend for your own business or for agencies?
I mean, the 5 to 10 minutes, I'm half joking. That's
It's tough.
literally don't go to the bathroom. um, because that's pretty significant. It reminds me a little bit of the early days of social when you couldn't let, 24 hours go by without responding to someone on social. That was insane. And now it's not that big of a deal, right? But it does remind me a little bit of that. And I think you're right that when somebody's ready, they've already done the research and they're ready. So they want to hear. So now you have to figure out, like, all I can think is in me running my own agency, how the heck would I do that?
Yeah, it's like the logistics of what you really actually can.
You've got to have a good process for that.
Speaking of which, so when it comes to, obviously, there's a lot of leads coming from the word of mouth and from the offsite referrals, but when it comes to actually establishing your digital presence, say you're an agency that you are actually just getting started, where do you need to have a presence online? Do you need your own website anymore? Can you just rely on Google My Business, on review sites? Heidi, what would you say when it comes to like either getting started or if you're missing these different channels, where do you need to be as a digital marketing agent?
Sure. So, I not drinking my own champagne. I hung my own shingle for about 2 years and never actually had a website. I was really fortunate.
You didn't?
I never had a website. I mean,
Really?
I bought the domain. I had the email address.
That's funny. I didn't realize that.
But I ended up with a core group of clients that I'd worked with before, all word of mouth, trade shows and conferences. That I never got to that point before my partner and I both said we're both consultants and maybe one of us should get a full-time job in health insurance. But I still think that a website is extremely important when it comes to presence. When you look at a customer's buying decision, they are looking online, but they are ultimately going to go to your site to dig in deeper and look for more information. Google is really important, particularly if you want to establish yourself locally. When you think about agencies, Google recognizes service providers as a local business as opposed to like a software. If I Google marketing automation software, my results are going to be all over the place. If I Google PR agencies, I'm going to get a map of Chicago with the PR agencies that are closest to me. So Google My Business is really pretty crucial in that regard. And review sites are crucial. Again, I can't express enough, like as much of a footprint as you can have across the web. People are finding us in myriad ways. The way that people ingest content these days is customized and aggregated to them. It comes in real time. So the bigger footprint you have, the better off you're going to be.
And I would add as the communicator on here, doing some of your own contributed content with industry trade publications and some of the others that accept contributed content, some of the nationals, because their domain authorities are really high, which means the search is going to help you. And so, if somebody searches, your website would come up, the review sites would come up, and then these articles that you have penned as well. Medium's a good example of that. Like, start to build your reputation on that first page of Google results and do it that way as well, combined with the other stuff. And you start to own that kind of stuff, and there's nowhere else for someone to go.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point too. I was just going to say, sorry to interrupt, Heidi, is just that Jeannie highlights the national, because like when we're talking digital marketing agencies, there's the folks who are, geography agnostic, where, they can be generating clients from anywhere over the country. And to that point, you want to be able to appear for any type of your target audience. Whereas like I know Dean, when you're more locally focused, like you're trying to find clients that are in your geography, it's a little bit of a different animal. Like Dean, what do you focus on locally in terms of your presence that might be different from, focusing just purely nationally or internationally?
Sure. So I focus on, and kind of piggybacking off what Jeannie said, when I'm looking for backlinks, because I do a little bit of my own SEO. So when I focus on local businesses to get links from their business to mine, or local publications. And where I focus most of my energy as far as reputation management is on Google My Business. So I make sure that I'm in there at least once a week, responding to reviews, posting photos, that sort of thing. Because, and I heard this, I forget where, but 3 times as many people are ever going to see your Google My Business page as are ever going to go to your website.
Wow.
Because you think about it, they're looking on their phone.
Yeah.
Yep.
The first thing they see is the maps, and then they say, oh, 50 5-star reviews, I'm calling that person. And that's it. They likely will never ever go to your website. I have many clients that have never seen my website, which is good because I don't think I've updated it in 2 years. So,
or in Heidi's case, don't have one at all.
You just don't have one.
Exactly. So yeah, I focus most of my attention, and I do for my clients as well, because most of my clients are local, either B2B or B2C. I focus a lot of their attention on Google My Business and their website.
Makes a lot of sense. So Heidi, whether you have a website or not, how, when it comes to your reputation and using social proof, what should an agency, how should they be using social proof on their website or on their digital presence? What types of social proof are there out there? Because I know you're really an expert when it comes to this.
And you know, it's funny. It's something I've probably been saying on webinars for over a decade now. But if you're looking at your social impact, don't count your followers. It really doesn't matter. And you know, I think people still really struggle to figure out what is my social strategy. And it's probably not to acquire new customers. It's probably to engage your current fans and customers and ambassadors, and to showcase different customers, to showcase your work. And when that's your objective and you have a really positive review, if you have a really positive comment, if there's something that's playing particularly well, that's something to really use as social proof to say, hey, here's additional digital reputation signals. But you know, when you think about your social strategy, don't expect it to be your lead gen strategy. Don't expect it to be, I need to increase my followers by 40% this year, but look at your overall engagement and the overall sentiment of what people are saying, and then use that as just another thing to point people to as they make a buying decision.
So that's interesting. So does it matter for digital marketing agencies then, where like their engagement with their clients online might not be as important, you know, as like a B2C type of business? Whereas like on the other hand, you have like Jeannie, like if you're trying to sell books or build a community, obviously engagement matters, you know, like your customers, your clients expect that. What about Heidi for most digital marketing agencies where they don't have the largest roster? What social proof matter in that context?
Sure. So, you know, I think at that point, the big thing to look at, and this is always really challenging on the social side, if you have limited resources, you really need to decide what strategies are the most important for you. And you may not want to hire a full-time social media manager, but instead just start really looking at those core KPIs of what you want to achieve through social. And so it may be that additional social proof signal to really start thinking through, how do I get people to say something positive about me? Again, that like, I'm delighting my customers, let me help them engage. But on top of that, uh, what can I do to make my current customers look good, my current clients look good, to continue? I mean, it all is like a self-fulfilling momentum here of, once one set of clients is happy, prospects start to notice it, and you're able to convert more. So it all just kind of keeps going.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about, you know, you do convert more. There is like some sort of like assisted attribution for that social proof too, because it's like when people are doing their research, I feel like they are going to check out your social channels and seeing if you have a presence there or not. I mean, it might not be the most important thing, but it can't hurt for the most part.
Yeah, I don't think you say, I'm not going to be on LinkedIn. Um,
Yeah.
but you may not need to post 3 original content articles every single week on LinkedIn.
Right. I would
That's
add too
kind of
that
where you have to start finding.
from a social proof perspective, having customer stories, as Heidi's mentioned, have that kind of stuff on your website. And if you can get it on video, even better, because that's what people love. And it's a real person, right? It's not a Bill C said so such and such, right? There's a real person behind that what you've done and saying, this is what so and so did, this is how they helped us, and these are the kinds of results that we got. That kind of stuff serves as really great social proof.
I think that's a great point. That kind of also differentiates too, Jeannie, is like the idea of the full-blown testimonial or case study versus like the review. Like there is a lot of value there to humanize that sort of story.
Yeah.
So speaking of like what you're putting on your website, taking it to the review site, Jeannie, for yourself, like if you're building your review site listing to represent your agency, how should agencies represent themselves on review sites? What is some of the information that you think might be essential to include? Maybe you're not doing it, maybe you're doing it, but what would you recommend to someone else?
I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question because I hate to admit that we're not listed. I will tell you though that I have a client in Canada, and his agency is Canadian based, and he's on the review sites, and I've never seen anyone generate so many freaking leads ever. I mean, and from all over the world, Israel, Turkey, like all over the place. And he's doing some really interesting work, and big companies too, not small mom and pops. So it's something that I started working with him about 3 months ago, and it's something that I've been like, okay. So again, cobbler's children, but yeah, I am not the right person to ask. Dean probably can answer that question.
So one thing that I try to do always is to humanize my business, because even in B2B, people want to do business with a person. So I make sure that for whatever value this is, I make sure that my face is on all of my profiles. And on my website, I've looked at so many agency websites, and it's like, who's behind this? There's no name.
I agree with that, yeah.
It's like, is this some spam from somewhere else? I don't know. So I make sure that there's a picture of me on my website, which, I have some clients that are like, well, I don't want people to know who I am. And it's like, why did you hire me then? Right, exactly. So I always say, put your picture on all of your profiles. Put it on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter and Google My Business. Make sure that it's there so that people can know who they're going to do business with. And I am primarily digital, but I always try to meet my clients face to face if I can. So like I spent an hour yesterday with a prospect at his shop. He does some really cool work, high-end stuff. And if he's a client, if he can be a client, that's great. If not, that's fine too. But that human element is so important.
Yeah.
People looking for okay, I'm going to be doing business with this person. So I think putting your face on all of your profiles is important.
And I think you really highlighted as well, Dean, the importance of understanding what makes your business different. When you look at what helps buyers make a decision, it's finding something that is really specific to them that they can relate to. So maybe you are a locally focused agency. Maybe you're focused on B2B versus B2C, or maybe you have a particular vertical, like you have a dental marketing agency and you have a lot of dentists you work with, or a lot of people in construction. But figuring out what those differentiators are, I think that consumers can see through, buyers can see through the marketing agency that does all services of all shapes and sizes to all people.
Right.
Maybe you specialize in the $1,000 a month PPC customer. Maybe you turn your back on anyone who's not paying you $10K a month or more. And both of those are very legitimate business practices, and we've seen very successful agencies on both of those extremes. But knowing exactly what your sweet spot is, and then making sure that reviews really highlight that uniqueness is what's going to help a buyer make a decision.
Right.
And I'm curious to you, Heidi, like from what you've seen with agencies who are building out their listings, I'd imagine, you have a sense of a more complete profile is going to be more appealing to, someone who's looking for an agency. What are the tips? Like, what are those go-to foundational pieces of information on UpCity that an agency like needs to have? Plus, what are some of those that really, elevates them compared to competition?
Yep. So I think the table stakes ones are the core focus areas, and budget. Budget tends to be one of the first things that um, buyers are looking for. And is this person completely out of my price range? And if they are, that's okay. Um, because frankly, if you do only take larger customers, you don't want someone who just self-published their book on Amazon contacting you and saying, I'd like you to help me get a couple people to read my book. Um, but maybe that is your sweet spot again. Now, what really differentiates, at least on UpCity, you're allowed to really highlight your portfolio through images and video. And like Dean was talking about earlier, putting a personal spin on that, whether it is your photo, whether it's your customers talking about you, like Jeannie said, whether it's just showcasing what makes you different, that's where we really see the differentiators in the profile completion. And hey, videos help the amount of time that someone is engaging with your content. They are going to spend more time on page. And that's just kind of a true stat. So thinking about that visual content is really important.
That makes so much sense. It's just so interesting, the budget thing. And I think we all know that when it comes to agencies, it's almost like taboo. It's similar in the SaaS space for a lot of them where, you're scared to put your pricing out there. Are you guys seeing that change at all? Is that still common where agencies don't want to show you under the hood right away? And what are your thoughts on that?
So we are offering two things. One, agencies are allowed to select multiple bands of budgets. So they may say, hey, I'll consider anyone from $500 a month to over 5,000, and that's okay. But when we have customers of that agency leave reviews, they 90% of the time will select what their budget was. And so I think that really helps grant the legitimacy of like, okay, this agency isn't promising this pricing to me, but I can see that these 10 people who did 5-star reviews all seem to be in the $2,500 to $5,000 a month bucket. So it almost like proves it out in a more transparent way.
I'm a big fan of transparent pricing, but overall service businesses don't do it. And I will freely admit that 10 years ago, I was at a dinner with some major bloggers, and one of them said to me, why is your pricing not on your website? And I was like, well, because it depends. Yeah, I mean, it's not the same price for everybody. It's, if you're going to do just media relations, it's one price. If you're going to do a complete peso model program, it's another. Like if you're doing an event, like it depends. And he smiled at me and he goes, do you have minimums? And I said, sure. And he said, why don't you put that on your website? And I was like,
called you out. Yeah.
Fine. So since then I have evolved and I'm a big fan of it. I think that so for me, what it did is it took away the tire kickers. And I remember that feeling because it was very ego driven. I was kind of like, nobody's calling anymore. And I'm not doing as many coffees and meetings anymore. And then I realized, wait a second, this is great because I'm not wasting my time and only the people that can afford us are actually calling. So yeah, I wasn't doing, 20 hours of meetings anymore. I was only doing 5, but those 5 hours were actually converting into clients. So big fan of transparent pricing. Big fan.
I think it's really interesting, and you're right. Like, there's that ego. There's also the fear there, right? Is like,
sure.
if you,
yeah. What if I scare away? Yeah.
Exactly. And your services are valuable. They're the value there, and someone's willing to pay it. But it's still that dance of not scaring away everyone. Dean, what do you think? What's been your philosophy?
So I do not publish my pricing and I could easily, because I have 4 or 5 packages that I sell, because that fits 99% of local businesses. But my goal when I sit down with a client, I have a document on my website you guys can download if you want, called the Digital Marketing Customer Bill of Rights. And when I sit down and talk to my clients, that's one of the first things I present to them. And number one is you have the right to a fair price. So what I do is I anchor a high price in their mind. And then when we get to the presentation point, all of those prices are lower than what they have anchored in their head. So they think, oh, wow, I'm getting a great deal. And they are.
A deal. Huh.
My CPA literally told me like 3 weeks ago, he's also a client. He was like, Dean, you probably should raise your prices. I was like, well, but
We should all raise our prices.
yeah, exactly, exactly. But I really want to anchor a high price point, because there are a lot of agencies out there that are charging astronomical fees for work that takes very little time and very little effort. And that's not what I do with my clients. So I don't publish my pricing, and that's partially a sales tactic on my part.
I mean, we're all marketers, right? Like it's figuring out of like, you want to do what works. You want to do what works for the client, but also for you. You're running a business and you have a responsibility. It sounds like all of you have really thought through the choices that you make. And there are a lot of philosophies out there. There are a lot of different perspectives. In terms of, so we've talked a little bit about budget, we've talked about social proof. When clients are evaluating you and, in the 5 to 10 minute range, expecting a phone call, maybe it's customer service, what do you think that clients are looking for when they're choosing your agency when it comes to reputation? What are those reputation factors that are either deal breakers or are really important to a client from your experiences?
I can start and just say that UpCity has put a little bit of science behind this, and the way that we decide whether an agency even qualifies to be listed in our marketplace is through our UpCity recommendability rating. And so it's basically an algorithm where we're taking in a bunch of different digital signals, because like Jeannie said, she may not focus 100% on reviews, but we look at reviews, we look at your domain authority, we look at your SERP scores, we look at your website experience, we look at your responsiveness, your engagement. So there are a bunch of different signals that we look at to say, okay, from an online perspective, can we say that this agency is recommendable because they've built enough of an organic presence? And I think when you even listen to the difference in our answers on the pricing question, all three of us are aligned in being really transparent with what our business is. And when you build up a variety of those factors, your reputation is really important. The one other thing I'll say is that when it does come to reviews, don't be afraid of the 4-star review. So many times you can have 100 reviews, and if they're all 5 stars, consumers tend to look at that as a little suspicious. I mean, the example I always give is that I use Airbnb all the time, and I will read the worst review, but if they have 50 great 5-star reviews and 1-star review, I will read the 1-star review and most likely take it with a grain of salt and be like, well, that person had a bad trip and I'm sorry for them, but so don't be afraid of a 4-star review. It gives you a human side.
Yeah. I actually had a prospect say to me, I don't believe you guys are a real agency because I can't find anything negative about you online. And I was like, go to Amazon, and then go to Facebook. You'll find negative stuff. But that's what she said to me. She said that she didn't believe that we were real.
Because especially in our industry too, I feel like that, especially if it's not a first-time business looking for an agency, so many people have been burned before. Sure. So, it's like the reputation does come into play there. So you can see why people would be skeptical when you do see there are a lot of like bottom of the barrel value propositions out there that are promising the world and not delivering, then people get burned. Jeannie, have you had someone come to you who hasn't had a good experience and kind of use your reputation to help like nurture and make them not scared?
Yeah, I mean, I hear it all the time. I'm in PR, so you know, the thing that I hear most often is I paid an agency $5,000 a month and we got nothing. And part of that is the industry's fault because there isn't a great way to measure the work that we do, and part of it's the agency's fault. I mean, it's the fault of the account managers and of the owner, because there are ways that you can measure, but there isn't a uniform industry way to do it. And I think that that's what it is most clients are like, oh, I paid all this money and I got, you know, a couple of stories, big deal, but it didn't result in anything. And so I hear that a lot. And because of that, we've really focused on what communications can do to the bottom line. And some in the industry call me a snake for it. But oh yeah, like I'm not very popular with some people because of it. But I really believe that marketing, any marketing discipline, should absolutely drive to sales, or whatever the objective is, donors or volunteers, whatever the objective is of the organization. It should, that's our job. And so I hear that a lot from, and they're scared. They don't want to spend another $5,000 a month and not get anything. So, you know, the backup that you have to provide, not just the social proof, but the case studies and the references and the testimonials and to, because they've been burned, to prove that you can actually do this work and have results it's significant.
Yep.
Absolutely. And to your point,
I think establishing those expectations is so important at the front end. I know SEO agencies struggle with this as well, because we all know you could go get backlinks and do a bunch of great stuff to your website, and Google's not going to notice it tomorrow. So the ROI of that is coming 3-6 months down the road. And so establishing that up front of like, this is a long tail effort to truly change something is really important.
Absolutely. And to your point, I mean, Jeannie mentioned the whole idea of using the testimonials, the reviews to help, you know, with that social proof, to show the value, show that they're not going to get burned. Getting back to like this whole building your reputation, Heidi, what are some of the tactics that agencies who are watching this webinar right now can use to start generating those reviews? Like, how do you get reviews as a digital marketing agency?
It's not easy. And, you know, I mean, the nice thing is, and shameless self-plug, that Great Us and UpCity both have tools to help you do that. But in saying that, I really think it comes down to the core of being able to delight your current clients and customers. And this is tough when you're just getting started. You may only have 3 clients, but you better hope those 3 clients are really happy. And make sure that you're talking to them about that throughout the entire duration. Have regular check-ins, understand whether or not they feel like they're getting what they asked for, and when they do feel like you've delivered or over-delivered, make sure that you say, be sure to share this with everyone. I will say one thing on the review side that's been really effective for UpCity is that every year we do reviews for a cause. And so this year we've chosen Lemonade Day, which is a charity that helps kids learn about becoming entrepreneurs.
Love that.
Through a lemonade stand.
Cool. Love that.
And so we will give $10 to a charity for every review. And if you think about it, like, we all work with business owners. I really don't care all the time about an Amazon gift card. It's not a lot of motivation to make me click. But if I know that $10 is going to charity, I am more inclined to be like, all right, I'll spend 5 minutes of my time. So that's actually been really effective for us. And then we've seen some of our agencies just implement that on their own. And it's a great way to start building that reputation.
I love that. Especially, I mean, obviously you have to understand the rules of the specific review site, like, you know, with Google incentivizing, whereas like, you know, personally, I love that UpCity would help facilitate or even, you know, be a, you know, pro using charity, you know, in, you know, accompanying a review. Like, that's so, why not? It's such a good cause. What are the policies for UpCity with reviews? What are the kind of thought process there?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a fine line of figuring out exactly what incentivization is appropriate, which is why we feel like we found a sweet spot with reviews for a cause. But I will also say that Up City prides itself on the back end that we still manually validate every single review.
Wow.
We have an algorithm that does a lot of the front end work, but there's still a human being who's taking a look at every single one. There's a lot of consumer doubt on a lot of sites, even Amazon and Walmart now are struggling with fake reviews. We want the reviews on our marketplace to be ones that consumers can trust.
So that's something that's coming up a lot lately, where it's like, are reviews trustworthy? And so, like, the fact that you have a system like that in place, I think, is really important, especially right now when consumers' trust in reviews might be shaken. To know that there is like a review ecosystem, review site where you go through that process of really vetting each review is a differentiator when it comes to where you want to have your listing. Dean, have you had any sort of experiences with asking for reviews, in terms of, is there an appropriate time to make the ask? You have a lot of face-to-face interactions with your clients, correct?
Yes. So one of the things that I do that I try to be very intentional about is, and you should always ask for a review at the height of happiness in the customer relationship, which normally is that first or second week when there's been a lot of interaction. We've done some work, and Grade.us is very helpful with this. That's one of the first things that I set up for most of my client is Grade.us. And what a lot of times I'll do is I'll call the client and say, hey, I would be a terrible marketer if I didn't ask you to give me a review through Grade.us. And by this time, they're familiar, they know what it's. And so they're like, oh yeah, no problem. And so that's how I've gotten a substantial number of reviews, is I just call them. And then what I do is I'll call them and ask them to do it. And then I'll text them the link.
The link.
Yeah, from my phone to their phone. So all they have to do is click on it and go. So I try to make it as easy for them to do it. And I also try to make it at the time they're happiest in the relationship, which I mean, we all know that's
how my meeting in does it too.
Yeah.
Great at it. Every time he's here, he sends me a link. All right. I'll do it again.
Well, that's the thing too that we all know as marketers, is where we can identify those repeatable processes, but also without losing the authenticity, right? Because it's like, it can't be a fake request. It can't be like a fake message. You need to massage it in a way where it's like they know it's you, they know it's Dean, they know it's Jeannie, they know it's Heidi making that request.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Nope.
Okay, so before we dive into the last question and answer, because this has been such an awesome conversation, and you guys are all a wealth of knowledge and all of these insights, where not a lot of agencies always have these conversations with other agency owners or people in the agency ecosystem, seeing what people are doing. Before we get to the question and answer, because there's some great questions in here, if you three had to give one key piece of tactical advice that a digital marketing agency should do right after this webinar to improve or start thinking about their reputation, what would that be? Dean, I'll start with you. What's the one key piece of advice you'd give?
Sure. So one of the things that I do, and I actually learned this from John Hall, who started Grade.us. He said, one of the things you should do, you should not just acquire reviews, but you should amplify reviews. And so when you get good reviews, copy and paste that and put that in your social media. So when someone says something good about you, tell the world that they said something good about you. And it's public because it's on Google or on Facebook. So it's all there for the public to consume anyway. So that's what I do, is when I get a good review, I put it on Facebook or LinkedIn, and tell the world that, hey, I made someone happy.
Love that.
I love it. It doesn't even need to be a humble brag. Just throw it out there, because
Right.
people appreciate when you're doing good stuff. Jeannie, how about you? What would be the number one piece of advice that you would give to a digital marketing agency, whether they're getting started or been around, to improve their reputation online?
I would say it's getting those testimonials if they can on video, and to Dean's point, get them while they're happy, and then eventually start to build in the review side of things. But I would get that stuff on your website as fast as I could.
Yeah.
Completely agree. I mean, the videos really resonate, especially with everybody having a mobile device these days. It's like videos is a very easy to consume type of content. You know, the key I would add to that is make sure you add subtitles to
Right.
the videos, because
Yes.
people don't want to go hear the
They
audio
don't
if they're
listen.
on the bus.
Right.
Heidi, what do you think? What's the number one piece of advice you give to any digital marketing agency enhancing their reputation?
Sure, and I'll cop out and give you two, but I promise they're
Cheater.
connected. One is to really think like your prospective buyer, um, and think about what their experience is. Don't be afraid to take a look and say, okay, if I was choosing a digital agency right now, how would I stack up against everyone else? What are my key differentiators? So, like, really taking a snapshot of that. The buyers in our marketplace, according to our surveys, want to read an average of 18 reviews. That's a lot of reviews. I mean, that's rough.
Yeah.
But that's what B2B buyers are looking for these days. And then the second piece of that, and this was probably the hardest lesson for me to learn when I had my own agency, is don't say yes to everything, because
That's a
you're
good
not
one.
going to be able to generate positive reviews, have a great online reputation if you can't fulfill. And if a prospect's expectations are out of whack, you're not going to be able to satisfy that just by working a lot harder. So take on the customers that are the right fit for you, and then they're going to be able to help you build your digital reputation.
That's such good advice, because you also think about it when you're scaling your agency, there are two main ways to do that, right? Is either to grow your employees and build your client roster, or increase your prices because your services are that much more valuable. So you have to kind of identify what route you're going to go, what's your business model.
Yep.
Awesome. So we got some great questions here. Some of it were throwbacks to earlier in the webinar, but we will come to those because they're still great questions. So even if we partially covered them, we can go a little more in depth. And for those of you, if you want to, now would be a good time to submit some questions if you haven't already. Okay, so Lisa asks, which platform do you use to get video reviews? How do you recommend getting those videos and putting them on the different platforms?
Just have them. So what I do is I will say, I'll give them like 3 questions. I'll say, state your name and your business, your title, what we did and what was the result, and whether or not you're happy. And I just have them recorded, and then I have them either email or text it to me, and we post it on YouTube, and then we embed it into the site. That's it.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
I've
beautiful.
also, for remote customers, I've also, if they want a little more hand holding, just recorded a video conference, just like we're doing right now.
Yep, that's a great idea too. Yep.
Just you could actually do it in an interview format, or you can hide your camera, but that way you can prompt them and edit it later. I mean, that's the nice thing, is we all have the tools in our pockets right now.
Yep.
Yep. Dean, would you say it's a good idea if someone does do the video testimonial? Because I know on Google you can add pictures and videos to a Google review. Do you think that'd be effective? Is there a way to possibly do that?
Yes, so with Google My Business, you can add a video, and I think they've increased the length up to 60 seconds now. Don't quote me on that, but I know you can do up to 30 seconds for sure. So if someone gives you just a short testimonial, absolutely use it. And the reason is, one of the factors that Google looks at is length of time spent interacting with your business online. So if somebody spends 3 or 4 minutes looking at your Google My Business page, and then they spend 3 or 4 minutes on your website, that's huge to Google. That is a great signal to them that they've found what they're looking for and that you're doing something right. So absolutely add it to Google My Business, and then also upload it to YouTube, and then embed that YouTube video in your website. So there's that link as well.
Google loves that.
Yep.
They do. Everything's connected, or they like it to be. So the budget question, when we're talking about that, is very interesting to a lot of folks. One interesting question from Peter was, and Jeannie, you could probably speak to this, is this question, so minimum pricing per service or minimum spend to engage? Like they work with clients starting at $2,000 per month. what do you suggest with when it comes to minimum pricing?
Yeah, I would, if that's what you do $2,000 a month and that's the minimum, then I would post that. You could also do a range. I think when we started doing it, our minimums were $5,000 a month. And you know, it's been 10 years. So as we've evolved, that has changed on the website. But I think you could even say, you know, 5 to 10 or 2,500 to 5,000 or whatever it is, you could do a range, but that's how I would handle it.
We have about 60% of the agencies in our marketplace who provide monthly ranges, like a retainer-based budget, but
Yeah.
another 40% who have project-based. You know, if you're a web design shop,
Sure.
you may not want everything to be evergreen. It may be heavily front-loaded with, you know, starting at $20,000 per website. So we do offer both options, and we've seen that, you know, you just have to think about what's right for your business.
Fair. Yep.
And that plays in perfectly to Robert's question, which is when you're talking about a project-based model, how do you handle the how much question, assuming they have provided you info on the scope of the project?
One of the
How do we
things
come up with our own pricing? Is that
So one of the things that I do is I tell people, look, there's a lot of agencies in town and they're not going to have a conversation with you for less than $7,000. So now $7,000 is in their head. I come in and say, you know, I literally will build a one-page website for a client for $750, which is horrendously cheap, but that's the part of my job that I love, is actually building the website and using the tools. So, you know, if it takes me 4 or 5 hours and I have fun, then fantastic. But so I anchored this huge number in their head, and then I come in with a realistic number. That's kind of how I do my pricing.
I love Dean's business model of I will offer discounts if it's fun for me.
It might take me 5 hours. I just made $10 an hour, but it was fun.
But I had fun, yes.
I remember the conversation I had with Dean, which is so great in terms of have a network of other agency owners, and there's this whole like community mindset of sharing clients and sharing leads. Like, you know, when you care about your clients, you know, he would say there's another agency that might be better suited for this type of service, even though we kind of do it. Let me introduce you, and then everyone does that. How did you get involved with that, Dean?
So I'm part of the Duct Tape Marketing Network, which was founded by John Jantz, who wrote Duct Tape Marketing. And there's about 120 of us now. And so John has done two things really well. He's chosen great people for the network, and then he's kept the good people in the network that play nicely. And we all just really get along. I've actually had clients say it's weird that you guys all get along this well, because I've referred business to other people that doesn't fit what I do, and I've had business. Yeah. And so we just, you know, we have a good time when we get together, and we're all over the world. But so we just play nicely, and a lot of that is thanks to John.
He has a new book out, by the way.
It is yes, it's awesome.
What do you guys like about it?
His new book is a deviation, and it's more like parables, and it's a daily like mindset kind of thing, you know, quotes and things like that to help you kind of set your mind straight for the day.
Yeah, it's called The Self-Reliant Entrepreneur, and it's like 366 kind of daily short reads on, and he used like Thoreau and some of those characters as inspiration.
That is cool. Check it out, John Jantz, Duct Tape Marketing. So we got one more.
Got a lot of free PR.
Yeah, right.
He's a great guy. We have a great relationship.
He's a great guy.
Great us as well. So this is a little bit of a beast of a question that Laura submitted, but I'm going to go through it. But it's really interesting. So Laura says that sales are the responsibility of the client's sales team, not us as digital marketers. Now, you can lead a horse to water, but what do you do when your campaign generates a boatload of marketing qualified leads, but they're not properly nurtured? Like, how do you deal with the expectation that your marketing campaign is automatically going to result in sales? What do you do when the management of your client measures your success by sales, which you probably can't control? So this is, you know, when you're What's the mindset there? Are you evaluating the C-suite, Jeannie, and you're just like, this is going to be a
Yeah, I mean,
disaster? Or
if we literally would fire that client because you can't, first of all, if you're generating a ton of marketing qualified leads and you're not in charge of nurturing those leads to become sales qualified, then you're not going to be successful. So you have to do that piece of it. If then you're turning it over and they are sales qualified and the sales team isn't following up, that's a massive problem. And it is one reason we would fire a client. Now, 10 years ago, if you had said to me, well, you have to fire that client, I would have been like, okay. So I'm in a different position today than I was at the beginning of my agency life. But I honestly and truly, those are the kinds of things you should be finding out in the meetings and the prospecting before they become a client. And you have to ask those hard questions and find ways to ask it so that you get the truth, because they're not always that, you could very well ask. So if we present you 100 marketing qualified leads a month, will your sales team follow up with that? And the CEO or whoever it is you're meeting with probably will say yes. So you have to ask the question in different ways to get to the truth. Tell me about your sales team. How do they sell? Do they prefer to be on the phone? Do they prefer email? Are they out in the field? Like, find out those questions. And then present some hypotheticals. Let's say that they have a list of 10 people that they know and 100 people that they don't. Who are they going to sell to? That's going to give you those kinds of answers.
And it's, to your point, it's such a challenge depending on the stage of maturity of their agency. Like,
right.
I can imagine it's a lot harder if you're very early on and you are struggling to find clients in the first place to, basically gatekeep. And I mean, but that's the whole thing, right? Is sales qualified leads in terms of the types of clients. How do you have any like things that you remember early on that you wish you had done differently? Or do you just have to kind of get into those clients, deal with it as they come, and do your best to navigate it until your agency's mature enough where you can fire clients?
I will tell you that to get around that. So I remember early on, I was sitting with a client, and they'd already become a client, and he said to me, "I really need PR to make the phone ring." And I was like, "PR's not going to do that." But that's what he wanted. So I had to figure out a way to get around it. And they ended up being a client for a really long time. But because of that and some other similar experiences, I remember being in one meeting where the CEO told us not to F anything up or he'd fire us. And I was like, okay, red flag. So you learn those things along the way. But to get around that and to get around sort of the optimism and where you don't get the truth always, we started saying, look, this is the way we do things. We come into your business for 2 days. We sit down with the executive team and your marketing team, whoever that happens to be, and we together create a strategic communications plan. And during that time, you're asking questions about financials and about sales and about the business, and you're getting something that, and you're building trust with the executives because you're putting them through this process, which they love. But you're getting the information that you need, and then you get to decide at the end of that, are we going to execute this work, or are we going to be like, bye? And you will find all of that information out you find it all out in a 2-day strategy session.
I mean, it's just really interesting, that whole challenge early on, and you learn along the way, over the years of doing it. It's like, yes, you refine your processes, you catch those red flags, but ultimately, it's something I feel like every early stage agency probably struggles with or has a story.
Yeah, I mean, write down a list of red flag questions. What are the things that are gonna make you go, whew, this is not a good fit for us? And then you have to decide if you're willing to live through it or not. And typically, if there are red flags, it's not going to end well for anybody. And then you don't get the good reviews and you don't get the good testimonials and all that stuff. So I always recommend writing down your question, the red flag questions. What are they? For me, one of them is, do you read books? And if they tell me no, that's a red flag.
That's fair. And Heidi, before we go, I just want you to touch on that in terms of how identifying the right clients can potentially impact your reviews as well, right?
Absolutely. And, I mean, I think this was something that I struggled early on, where either it does impact your reviews and your overall reputation, or you're going to be working like 80 hours a week for like $500 a week to make sure you can deliver.
Unless you're
on
having
the
fun.
numbers.
If you're having fun, that's okay.
But if you're having fun,
That's right.
then it's all worth it. But what I will say is that, sorry, sorry guys.
You've held out really well.
25-year-old.
You've been wondering why I popped off video here and there. But I do really think, you know, what we've seen in Up City is we had a couple of key agencies in our marketplace who came to us and said, hey, you're sending a lot of clicks to us. We're just not closing any business from it. And just to identify, because we've seen the buyers that are coming to our site, we actually took over the process for them and created a landing page for them, took the initial phone call for them, and both of them saw an over 50% increase in conversions. So again, it's like really knowing the probing questions about the things you may not be an expert at. You may be a digital marketing agency, but you have to know your ABCs of sales conversion to know if they're going to do the right thing with what you're doing for them at the end.
That's awesome. You three have been amazing. I've really enjoyed this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us today and this amazing audience who's submitted these great questions. I hope everyone in the audience, you know, got some good knowledge. We all have tactics of what we should do as soon as the webinar is over, and you know, get your listing set up on upcity.com and start earning reviews. I'd like to thank everyone specifically and where to find them. So Heidi Sullivan, the SVP Product of Marketing at upcity.com. You can find her on Twitter at HKSully, S-U-L-L-Y. Feel free to direct any questions to any of these fine folks. They're very helpful. They always enjoy helping out. We have Jeannie Dietrich from spinsucks.com. That's at GINIDIETRICH on Twitter. And we have Dean Heasley, the founder of Nashville Marketing Systems, which is nashvillemarketingsystems.com. Feel free to reach out to Dean on there. Dean, I believe you have a contact form on there if anyone has any questions.
Yes.
My name is Garrett Sussman. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager at Grade.us. Grade.us helps agencies and their clients, you know, generate, monitor, and showcase, market their positive online reviews online. Check us out at Grade.us. Thanks again, everyone. It's been a pleasure. Signing off. Everyone have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Garrett.